So during this demonstration, I'm going to show you all how to use Dynamesh and some other functions to do some major manipulation, and then show you how to use some of the sculpture tools to refine that manipulation. So I'm going to make kind of a monster head here to kind of show you all how to do it. And once again, using this tool here, I can kind of rotate my sphere and see how it is. So if I make a line here, I can, rotate it really easily. You can rotate outside, that sort of thing. So Control Z undoes things. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here to Geometry, and I'm going to click on Dynamesh. And I know I want to make some big changes, so I'm actually going to take my Dynamesh resolution down to 16, and then remesh my sphere. As you guys can see, it's quite a bit more angular and more geometric. If I were to show my polyline fill, we can see it's got a lot of big squares. And this is best when you're doing big changes. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my move tool to kind of elongate my sphere to get it to more of the general shape that I want. And now that I've got it kind of that shape, I think I'd like to give it a bit of a taper. So I'm going to use the gear menu, and you can do all sorts of things with this. If you wanted to give it a bend, you can come in here and there we go. We drag this green one down the top, we can give the sphere a big bend if we wanted to, etc., etc. But I'm going to go ahead and just hit accept with no basic thing there. I know I want to give it a taper, so I'm going to go into here, into this menu, and taper my head. Make it pointy here, and then a little bit wider at this end here. I'm just dragging these little triangles to kind of get that basic shape there. Then what you would do is you would just click accept, and then it's going to take it back to my regular rotation menu. Now I'm going to start making some big changes. So I use the move tool, grabbing the draw size and dragging it way up, so we have a nice big surface here. And I want to be sculpting back in symmetry, so I'm going to hit X to make sure. And if you guys can see, there's a little red dot on the other side that shows me whatever I do on this side is going to happen to the other one. So I'm going to start by kind of mushing the jaw in a little bit and kind of bringing it out. I know I'm going to want this thing to be kind of serpentine looking, so I'm just going to drag it out there, widen it up. And I'm just kind of using this move thing over here to kind of move the file around. I'm just making some big motions here. I'm going to spin my file around and readjust the movement here. Zoom out a bit by taking this and dragging it up and down. And I'm going to transition to the neck here, so I'm just going to go ahead and pull this in. Pull it out a little bit here. Once again, I have the Dynamesh resolution set really low, so I can really drag big sections of the mesh around. Alright, so now that I have my overall shape, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide my lines here and take a look at it, see if it's kind of what I like to see here. I'm going to drag this up a little bit more. I know I'm going to want a jaw to come out here, and as you guys can see, if we look at the polyline, we're in a lot of manipulation here. So once I get the basic form locked in, I'm then going to come in and remesh it to kind of get that mesh evenly distributed across the surface. So now I'm going to come back to Dynamesh, and I'm going to turn my resolution up higher. So I'm going to probably start out at about 300. 350 something, that area. I'm actually going to tell it to polish so it gets rid of a lot of those planar surfaces. And then I'm going to hit Dynamesh, and there we have it. So let's take a look at the poly. Alright, so that's nice and poly filled in there, because if we zoom in, we can see we got a lot of little polygons. So I'm going to zoom back out again. apply my polyline fill. And first thing I'm going to do, while I've got my brush real nice and big here, I'm actually going to take the clay buildup tool and I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm going to smooth the surface out to kind of get rid of these jaggies and the edges and everything. I'm just holding down Shift and running across it with the clay buildup tool to smooth out my surfaces here. Alright, so there we have that bit. I'm going to move it into place here. Now I'm going to start using the clay buildup tool, which is a very basic brush that is going to add big chunks of kind of square clay. But I'm going to take the draw size down, not that far. I'm going to take the draw size down a little bit and start adding clay on and removing clay to kind of get the form roughed out. Now, I'm still in symmetry, so everything I do to one side is going to happen to the other. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down Alt and dig out a little eye socket area. Just get that roughed out, and then I'm just going to hold down Shift to smooth it. Then I'm going to build up a little brow ridge here, general shape here, and get some kind of buildup of muscle tissue and where scales would be and that sort of thing. Good working down here. I'm going to take this opportunity to go ahead and build up part of the mouth too. And I'm just very gently kind of going over the surface here, my pressure sensitive pen, and now I'm going to hold down Shift and smooth some of this stuff out. Now smoothing will relax the mesh, but it'll also reduce the mesh, so you have to be careful when you do that because you can destroy a lot of your detail. So I'm going to place that in there. So that is the clay buildup brush, and that is a great way to just build up a lot of kind of surface without much work. Alright, so that's the clay buildup. The standard brush, some people like the standard brush. It's actually more of a circular building tool, and it inflates the surface a little bit too. It doesn't actually add clay like the clay buildup brush does. This more or less just kind of inflates the surface that you're dealing with. And if we look at the polyline fill, as you can see, that mesh is getting inflated in those spots. So that's what a lot of folks will end up using. Some people really like it. I like it with a really narrow brush because you can get some really fine kind of line work going there. If I wanted to kind of build up like the start of a nostril form, this would be a good tool to kind of start building that with. So let's start building that in there. Little scale forms maybe. We do that with this tool. So the Dam Standard brush is a tool kind of like this brush, the standard brush, but it's opposite. By the way, any brush that you have selected, if you just hold down Alt, will do the subtractive effect. So if I were on the standard brush and I were building and I wanted to trim an area down, I could hold down Alt and just carve in. The same thing with the other brush, the clay buildup brush. So Dam Standard will make little, this is usually what I do to make like line work or any kind of little details or carving in and out, that sort of thing. If I wanted to kind of start digging the mouth down, Dam Standard is a good way to do that, because it'll actually not only make cool digs, but it'll smooth out the edge of the dig too. Down into here, hold down Shift to smooth it out. Alright, so the move tool is just like we were using it before, but if you use it on a smaller diameter, you can actually pull up and make changes to other things in your mesh. If I wanted to kind of make these ridges more pronounced, little spikes, just kind of pull out. But this will pull the mesh and elongate it, so you have to be a little bit careful with that. This is also good for let's say you're in a position where you don't really like the width of the jaw. You're using the move tool, you can make big changes to the jaw, by narrowing it down, that sort of thing. So it's going to pull the mesh in as well as stretch it. Trim Dynamic basically takes big pieces off of your mesh, so you can, remove parts and smooth things out, but this can be a little tricky to use, so you do want to approach it with caution because it will pull off too much of your mesh if you're not careful. So you can make little marks and kind of give stuff angled surfaces with the Trim Dynamic. Polish will also do that to a lesser degree, less extreme though. So the pinch tool will basically pinch your sculpture in wherever you run it. So it's almost like you've just taken your fingers and pinched a piece of clay. That's what the pinch tool will do. The inflate tool will basically inflate parts of your mesh. So let's say you wanted this to be wider. You could run the inflate tool down the side, and that's going to basically beef up the mesh. But it will distort your mesh. As you can see, these ripples that are starting to appear here, that is mesh that's stretched out. Once you get kind of a lot of your major changes done, you're probably going to want to re-Dynamesh your model because it's going to redistribute your mesh. So I'm just going to click off the Dynamesh, and then I'm going to remesh the model by clicking Dynamesh again, and then let's see if we can smooth this out. So if I hold down Shift on my clay buildup, yep, see now that mesh is nice and evenly distributed across that surface there, even though we inflated it out. And the inflate tool will actually make big changes too. So if I wanted to get like a big bump, you could really come in here with the inflate tool on a big diameter and really make big changes to your mesh. But you're always going to want to re-Dynamesh those after you make those changes, because if I were to make a line across this now, it would start out smooth and then it would start to get jaggy as it goes across the surface. So you always want to re-Dynamesh your model. These are some basic sculpting tools. There's also more advanced sculpting tools in this menu over here. So if you click this, you can see that there's a lot of choices of different types of sculpting tools that you can use. If you wanted to, you can use some of these, chisel molds, which will basically pull out a shape from your mesh that's already pre-generated, almost like a stamp. In different forms like this, you just got to give it a second to load and that sort of thing. So that's a great way to kind of really quickly put in things like that. But once again, you're going to want to come in here, and after you put this stuff in, you're going to want to come in and Dynamesh it again, so it's nice and distributes the mesh nice and evenly across the surface. Or when you want it to come in, like let's say you wanted to come in and add some ridges to this, you could then come in with your standard brush and get some detail going that makes it more yours, less of a stamped kind of a thing. So there's all sorts of interesting brushes that you can try out within these three or four different chisels here. Those will, all be different. If I were to select, chisel 3D, it's going to bring up all kinds of weird eyes and things like that. Now, the thing about eyes is I would not use a chisel to make an eye because it won't give you much control over the eye once it's put in there. What I'm going to show you how to do is I'm going to show you how to make an eye and then mirror the eye. And this is any way you can make a subtool. So if you wanted to make a big giant horn or something, you can make it using this technique. So let's say we're going to go into the subtool menu, and we're going to append, and we're going to use a sphere. All right, now see that's a huge sphere, so we need to get it a different size. So we're just going to use the move tool. We're going to size. We're going to size the sphere down, and if you've got something inside your form, what you can do is you can hit this transparent button, and it'll make your subtool that you're not selected on transparent so you can see through it. So I know I'm going to want to drag this eye out and get it kind of placed. So I'm going to get it out here, and it's still inside, so I pull it out, and as you can see, we start to break that surface, and I'm going to manipulate it, pull it in to the socket that I built for it. Now I'm going to turn my thing off transparent to see how it looks. All right, it looks a little bulgy, so I'm going to move it in a little bit, and then I'm going to sculpt on top of it. So before I start sculpting on top, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually duplicate this. Then I'm going to go down to here to deformation and tell it to mirror that last subtool, and then it pops over to the other side. So now when I come back and go back to my original mesh, and turn the draw tool back on, the clay buildup tool back on, I can start sculpting an eyelid right over top, because they're two completely separate meshes. And if I had just drawn an eye in using that chisel tool, then I would be stuck with it, and if I were putting in this eyelid over top, it would be manipulating the eye that I just put in. But now it's kind of by itself, and that allows me to make all kinds of changes to this now. Whatever I'm doing on that side happens on this side, which is pretty awesome. So now I've got a creature with some eyes. That's the basic sculptural demo, and I will be uploading more later. But I hope this was helpful.